Okay, we are now in the air, recorded. A couple of announcements. Next week, the class is going to be a little bit different. Today is the penultimate class. And because it's the last week, next week, we're going to do two things. We're going to shorten the class a little bit. The regular class will be, I don't know, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes shorter. And then there will be none of the question time or observations, because the second half of it is going to be devoted to the history book club group. What we're going to do, we're going to hear a description of the books that have been nominated or suggested for next week, the next season's history book club. We meet every month, the third Monday of every month. In any case, and by the way, some of you have sent your suggestions in already
to Walt.
Walt Havens, and my batch will be coming in this morning, Walt, later. I'm suggesting 6 titles this time, a lot. So those of you that are, I announced it last week, if you're thinking of titles to send in, the deadline is this Sunday. So today is Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Thursday. So we have 4 more days. So be sure to get your titles sent in, those who are interested in being in the History Book Club. And so new people have already emailed me. If you want to join and get in on the History Book Club, just send me an email and let me know. Work telephone. And then next week, what we're going to be doing is hearing descriptions of all the suggested books. And then I will tell you how the voting is going to go. But that'll be this. That should take about 45 minutes or so after the regular class is finished and cut a little bit short. See anything else? I guess that's all. Okay, now.
Sorry, Bill, can I just ask you to repeat that? I was having a problem with my internet and wasn't connecting. You were saying the History Book Club is an option as well?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, we do the History Book Club gathering once a month for the rest of the year, from April till November or December. Make a note of this,
Okay.
Please. And what I'll do, I'll send you the details of how to see. I have to have your email address to send out. Diana will send out the quote invitation.
Okay.
So that would. Okay, yeah, Diana is going to do that. So that would be great if you can join us, Ariana.
I'd love to. That sounds like so much fun. So I will definitely I think Diana.
Okay, that's okay.
I've got it.
Thank you, Ariana.
And
We're going to start the class now.
okay, a review. What did we cover last time? The brief. The Germanic peoples, who have never been very good at organizing themselves into a state, a political unified state, finally did it. The political astute leader was Clovis, who for the first time created a united kingdom of the Germanic peoples, the Frankish peoples over in the western extremity, which was Gaul. And then, as we saw, after a couple of centuries, his empire the Merovingian Empire came totally unraveled. But then a second rise from the ashes of the phoenix. Charles Martel and his grandson Charlemagne. Charlemagne was able to create a huge, powerful, and effective kingdom of the Germanic peoples. He was also a Frankish German in the West, but he ruled for some 41 years, I think. Very successful and huge empire, beautifully united. But then, thanks to his three grandsons who divided up the kingdom, it very soon came totally unraveled, disintegrated. By the way, there's one correction, please, on the outline for last week. Charlemagne was crowned not only king, but emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Well, no, of the Carolingian kingdom, Charlemagne's empire. The Pope that crowned him was Leo III. It's an error, typing mistake on the outline. Okay, that's where we're starting today. When Charlemagne's three grandsons, and you're familiar with them, in the West was Charles the Bald. The Middle Kingdom was Lothair. And then the Eastern Kingdom was Louis the German. And they all disintegrated. And that was only one crisis. The disintegration of Charlemagne's empire was one crisis. And what was happening during that century was a perfect storm of disasters for the German people. Perfect storm of disasters. Besides the disintegration of Charlemagne's great empire, thanks to his grandsons, that was merely one disaster. Another thing that happened, but you don't hear much about, there were volcanic eruptions, and volcanic plumes ruined the crops in the German lands for year after year, for several years. So that meant famine. It was a period of famine because the grain crops were ruined. And then finally, a third and fourth disaster was invasion by foreign armies. That is to say, and we're quite familiar with the Vikings who invaded from the north and terrorized all the coastal areas of Germany, and including sailing up the rivers like the Seine River into Paris, up the Rhine River. So the Vikings terrorized the Germanic people from the north. From the east, as we know, the Hungarians, that is to say the Magyars, rode in by horseback, and they marauded back and forth across the German lands for a couple of decades. And they especially trashed the southeastern area of the German lands. So that was a perfect storm, a very disastrous year for the Germanic peoples, the German peoples. However, and this continues to be the pattern of German history, there arose a new leader of the Saxon Germans, that is, the German Saxons of the eastern part of the Germanic peoples, who had settled over as far as the Elbe River. They're going to be spilling beyond the Elbe in a few minutes here. But the leader was Otto the First, King Otto the First, soon to become Emperor Otto the First. He was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. The emperors tried desperately to keep their continuous culture from the ancient Roman Empire. It had been so effective. So Otto the First was able to rule for 38 years, a very long, successful rule. So we're going to go to the first map. We're going to illustrate Otto the First's empire. That's it. Yeah, this is an excellent map of the new Holy Roman Empire that Otto was able to piece together. It was an extraordinarily difficult job, but what he did, first of all, there were rebellions among several of the great nobles, the barons, and Otto the First was able to reconquer the Duke of Bavaria. And look at here's the Duchy of Bavaria, this darkish green. You see the white arrow circling. The Duke of Bavaria had revolted, which was a dangerous thing to do if the overlord is effective. Otto II managed to subdue the kingdom, the little duchy, not little, the Duchy of Bavaria. That, of course, is, yeah, that's where Munich is today. And Otto I confiscated his entire duchy. So all this green area was lost. The Duke of Bavaria lost everything, his family, his dynasty, and that became part of Otto's empire, the Holy Roman Empire. Same thing if you go over to Lorraine. Now see this light green area, which is the arrows circling it. The Duke of Lorraine, this is the Duchy of Upper Lorraine. The Duke of Lorraine also had revolted, and Emperor Otto invaded that area, defeated him, and confiscated all of that land. That now became part. And same with Upper. There was another Duchy of Lower Lorraine right here, the darker green. All of those dukes were defeated and their importance was totally destroyed. They became part of Otto's empire. Then over in Saxony, right here in the far north, that light green, the Duke of Saxony also had revolted. Same thing there, Otto invaded, destroyed his military and added that. So in short, much of this area, that was really only the start. Otto was able to expand the boundaries of the Germanic Empire. He was able to retake this, Upper Lorraine, Lower Lorraine, down. That whole area used to be, if you remember, it was the Middle Kingdom, the kingdom of Lothar, one of the three brothers who all squabbled and piddled away their lands. Also, Otto was able to conquer the area of Friesland. Now, Friesland is up here, it's present day Holland, the Netherlands, rather. So the new territories stretched all the way from Friesland here on the North Sea, all the way down to Italy. And most of Italy was also reconquered and added to Otto's empire. So this is the Holy Roman Empire. It's considered the first Holy Roman Empire, also known among the Germans as the First Reich. This is the First Reich, which in name is going to last for several hundred years. And look at over here at Burgundy. This is the yellow part here. It's the kingdom of Burgundy. That will be added a little later to the Holy Roman Empire. So here's another high point. If you're thinking in terms of the German history as an accordion squeezing way out its boundaries out, this is one of the high points. To the far north, far south, east and west, and it had come out of the ashes where the boundaries had, effective boundaries had shrunken into almost zero. So we've had three of those rises and falls. Clovis and his empire, which disintegrated, Charlemagne, his great empire, which disintegrated, and now Otto the First.
Do we have a date?
Yeah. Otto was the king and emperor from 936. It was the middle part of the 10th century. So he was the ruler from 936 to 973. Very successful period for the Germanic peoples. Then,
Picture of it.
yeah, let's see. Here's a picture of Otto the First, crowned as not only king, but also emperor. He was crowned by Pope John the 12th down in Rome. So he's wearing double crown right now, king and emperor. And Otto here became very, very popular when he had to the east, he had finally defeated the Magyars, the Hungarians, in 2 victories. So, and that expanded his territory down to the southeast. And he also defeated, just north of the Hungarians was Slavic peoples. He had defeated some of the Slavic peoples. So he was able, can you go back to the previous map? Take a look at this section here. This is a new frontier. You see the stripes, the green and white stripes, that area? That's the area beyond the Elbe River. So if you follow this dotted line, that is the Elbe River. That is the traditional boundary of the German people. And now there's going to be an extraordinary movement, a colonization movement beyond the Elbe River over toward the Oder River, which is this darker line. You see the word Oder right here, and it becomes the Oder-Neisse River. So when Otto, this is an important moment, when Otto defeated the Slavic peoples, Hungarians first, and then the Slavic peoples, he firmed up the eastern border of the German kingdom. And then that made it possible to expand across into new territory. And the next map is going to show the, yes. Now this map is a good geophysical map. You see it, let's take a look over from all the way from the lower Lorraine in the far west, Friesland up here. And here, take a look at the Elbe River. It starts right up here at Holstein, right there, and comes down here, pretty much down this black line, that had been the border of the Germanic peoples. And now all of this pink and reddish burgundy color, all including this, you see how it sprawls all way into Silesia, and all the way down here into Austria. All of this area is new territory. This is part of the amazing event, the colonization movement from west to east into new lands, lands where the Germans had never been. So it's a pioneer movement, which was made possible by Emperor Otto I. Okay, who were the pioneers? Who was it that crossed the Elbe and started started homesteading? That's using an anachronism in this new territory that was terra incognita, unknown territory. Well, there were, three or so notable groups. Who were the ones who became the pioneers? First of all, the nobility, the Saxon nobility, the Saxon aristocrats. Now, the ones who were fairly wealthy. What they did, they pack up their entire household, family, servants, or soldiers, head into the new territory, stake out. And this was pretty much a wilderness. It was a dense forest. Some of the open lands were marshy and swampy, but some very good farmland in there. So the Saxon nobility, another group were Saxon merchants who found that they could earn real profits by crossing the Elbe, staking out an area in this new colonized area, which goes all the way up to the Oder River and slightly beyond. So merchants, and there was even a group of monks, Cistercian monks, who charged into the, they didn't charge, they walked into the new lands and set up monasteries, Cistercian monasteries. And they made an interesting contribution we'll get to in a minute. So then we have several different groups of Germans in this large, it's a very large, important new frontier land. So the Germans moved in, cut down trees, cleared the forests, built a village, built villages, then cut down more trees, cleared more land, and planted crops. And the soil was quite fertile in some of the areas here. Now the question, did the German pioneers find any people in that area? Yes. Who were they? There were Slavic peoples. Some were still migrating in from the east, coming the opposite direction of the Germans from the west. But it had been populated by some Slavic peoples. And the Germans met, of course, they encountered them. Basically, what the Germans did was conquer. It was like a tidal wave. They swept over and dominated near most of the Slavic peoples in that whole area. And the more they got acquainted, the Germans felt that these Slavic peoples were not very civilized. The Germans looked down upon them as lower on the scale of civilization. They developed a contempt. So what these inferior people in the eyes of the Germans conquered most of them. captured them and enslaved them. So the Slavic people became slaves, and very soon serfdom, they became serfs bound to the land of the prosperous German landowners. So feudalism began in this area at this point, where the Slavs became peasant serfs. And so the Slavic serfs did virtually all of the farming work, helped clear more of the fields and pull out the trees and plant new crops, plow the land and plant new crops. And this was actually quite dangerous territory. All this frontier area was dangerous because groups of the Slavs were able to get together. In fact, there was an extraordinary revolt, the Great Slavic Rebellion, the Great Slavic Revolt, late the end of the 800s, early 900s. And that slowed the German pioneer movement for some time. And that burbled for a long time, for about 100 years. But eventually, and there were two waves of German pioneers before the Slavic revolt and afterwards. The colonization movement kept on for about 300 years. So that the Great Slavic Revolt began in 983, caused an intermission. And by the way, by this time, even the Germanic peoples virtually all had become Christianized, converted to the new Christian religion, the Catholic religion. And so when they were pioneering into new territory, they brought their new religion with them and converted and tried to convert the Slavic peoples. But just one example, take a look at see from the Elbe River to where was this river?
The Oder.
The Oder River. Here's where the Oder River starts, up on the Baltic Sea, and comes down. Just to give one of many examples, the Prince Boleslav brought with him, he was a German pioneer, brought with him a group of Cistercian monks and had persuaded them to start a new monastery. And they went, follow the White Arrow from the Baltic Sea. They went up the Oder River all the way down to Silesia, which is in present-day Poland, the beginning of a mountainous area. So that area, that's a huge expedition for a pioneer into dangerous country. So Prince Boleslav and his family set up their estate in Silesia, and also they brought the Cistercian monks that they brought along with the understanding that they would start a new monastery. So the monks were clearing the fields and for their own monastic buildings. By the way, the history of Benedictine monks, the Cistercians, by the way, are a breakaway from they're part of the Benedictine order, but they, in an age of corruption and worldliness, they became more serious and more pure, more faithful to the rule of St. Benedict. So these are the highly devoted Cistercians who established the first monastery down here in Silesia. And the monastery groups all through history have been on the lookout for a location where they could practice, where silence and solitude was possible. Now, this is the fabulous example. If you want to get away from it all, move hundreds of miles east into Silesia. So the monks were always on the lookout for a place to get away from it all that was far away from the world and devoid of distractions, temptations, family, and women. Temptation. So there were fewer temptations in this area, these frontier areas. And the Cistercians made an unusual contribution that we don't read about much. The Cistercians and other monasteries all through this, the new frontier area, the dangerous frontier land, the Cistercians undertook large-scale land drainage schemes. Large-scale land drainage schemes, because some of the area was swampy and marshy. And so the Cistercians were able to drain swamps, drain marshland, build dikes, and create fertile farmland from what had formerly been the sea. Now, how did they do this? They brought experts. You go way back to the Friesland over here. Well, it's Flanders. Flanders is today in this area right here, present day Belgium. So the peasants and the monks from this area had plenty of experience already in how to drain the marshlands, and build dikes, and of course everybody knows about this. The Dutch, the Belgians, and especially the Dutch, were masters of expanding their new land out into the sea, into the North Sea, by draining swamps. They built how to build canals and drain shallow sea water areas, build dikes, and create new lands. Well, those experienced peasants and monks from Flanders there were brought all the way over here to the mouth of the Oder River and came down into Silesia. But they also, mostly where these monks did their marsh draining was along the coast, all along the shoreline, where there were marshy and swampy areas. Okay, this next map is the map of the Baltic Sea.
You didn't want to tell them.
No, there. Okay, this is a good map to show, besides that pioneering movement, which began way over here on here's the Elbe River, running right down there. Pioneering movement from there over to the Oder, which is in this area. That overland, okay, there was that overland pioneering movement, but parallel to that, there was a colonization movement by sea. That is, starting, let's go all the way over here to Schleswig-Holstein. This is on this side.
Sorry.
With the south of Denmark today. No, it's on this side. This is the Baltic Sea, begins here, and it runs. Let's go slowly across the north coast of Germany, future Poland, Danzig, that area, up into Prussia, all the way up into here, and all the way to this this arm of water that goes all the way to St. Petersburg, Russia. So the German colonists, pioneers, they built little trading villages all along this coast, dozens of trading villages, starting with Lübeck, which is right there, wrong side, right, go north, right there, at the very beginning of the Baltic Sea. So Lübeck was established in 1134, settled by German colonists, pioneers. And there was a string of other German cities very close, right in this area right here. You go back slowly back and forth to this little peninsula. Right in that close area, Germans settled new towns like Wismar, Rostov, Stralsund, very beautiful, rich towns later on, which we will see in first or second classes next January, the Hanseatic League. And then more German settlements approachable by sea, even some up in present-day Sweden. But along, let's go to the Vistula River, which is over here. The Vistula River, which today runs down the middle of Poland. These German traders went up the Vistula, it looks like down because it's from north to south, and established trade settlement at Krakow, Poland today. Notable, it's a very rich and storied city, most recently famous because Pope John Paul II grew up there in Krakow. That began as a trading city of the German pioneers to the east. Now this, to look back over the scope of history, let's go back to the last map, anyway.
This one?
Yeah. Yeah. This pioneer movement, is it easy to get to?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, okay. Now this pioneering movement, which was a large and important part of Northern Europe, has not gotten the credit. Historians and publicists have not given the recognition to this remarkable pioneer movement. But it's much less famous than 1066, which was happening at exactly the same time when the Normans of the continent, just off the map down here, built their fleet of ships, sailed across the English Channel and conquered England. 1066, everybody knows about that. But at the same time was this pioneer movement all the way across this pinkish area. But how many people know about that? It's been highly neglected. But it's as if there was a voice telling the German peoples, go east, young man. Go east, young man. Become a pioneer, go east. And of course, that immediately, I'm paraphrasing, of course, the famous quote by Horace Greeley, who was the editor of the New York Tribune, who, of course, in an editorial in the New York Tribune in 1865, he said it was at the end of the Civil War, the American Civil War, he encouraged the young veterans from the war other young men in the East and the Midwest to go west and make your future there. It's the possibilities for becoming successful and rich are endless. Go west, young man. So, but the movement go east, young man, that simply did not get much press from historians or journalists until this next book. Next picture is a book published in 1993. It was an important book. And this is on your reading list, by the way. The Making of Europe, Conquest, Colonization, and Cultural Change, 950 to 1350. This book explains better than any that I know the pioneering movement across Germany to the east, their expansion to the east. And this wasn't published until 1993 by a gifted British historian. And this book has shone the spotlight on that pioneering movement of the Germans, which finally is getting a little more publicity. Okay, at this moment, we're going to pause and I'll take an overlook of history, and I'm going to ask two questions. Second one is very difficult. Okay, first question. Why did the German colonization movement take place? Why did this pioneer colonization movement of the Germans take place? Why? Well, one semi-obvious answer is because the population had increased appreciably. The population of Germanic people had spiked appreciably just before this time and during this time. Okay, the second question, which is very difficult. Why did the population of Germans increase appreciably at the time of Otto I, just before and during the time of Emperor Otto I? Difficult question, but there's several answers. I'm going to suggest 4 answers for the rest of the class. Okay, first answer is this. There was a drastic change of diet, a drastic change in diet of the Germanic peoples. What was that? Well, what had the diet for centuries, the principal diet for the peasant, the working class, the farm workers, the peasants, which is over 95% of the population, the diet consisted of bread. The crops were barley and wheat, and that was really about all that was available in any abundance at all. So for all through the so-called Dark Ages, after the fall of the Roman Empire, the main diet of the Northern European, well, virtually all Western Europeans, was bread, principally bread. And what happened, something startlingly new happened, namely a whole new nutritional diet was introduced to the Arab expansion.
Okay.
Because the Arabs, the Muslims, we're back to this excellent map showing the rapid expansion of Mohammed's Arab population, Muslim population. But a quick repeat, they had 2 years after Muhammad died, his warriors on horseback marched to the east, conquered the entire Persian Empire. They charged north, conquered half the Byzantine Empire, and then delayed from Cairo. They marched all the way across North Africa, rapid conquering everything, paused at Carthage, sailed across and conquered Sicily. So now Europe is being occupied by Muslims, by Islam. And the Arabs brought a whole new food, actually a lot of food, new food, the most important of which was legumes. Legumes, that is beans, peas, and most importantly, the broad bean, which is looks much like a lima bean today. So that new nutritional food spread through the new Arab occupation of all of Sicily. They occupied all of Sicily beginning in the year 827. And it gradually spread throughout Europe. And secondly, after a pause there at Carthage, present-day Tunis, the Muslim invaders charged all the way across to the Atlantic Ocean, Tangier, crossed to Gibraltar in the year 711, conquered virtually all of Iberia, Spain and Portugal in about 2 years. And of course, you know, they kept on going up to the Battle of Tours, where Charles Martel finally stopped this wave. But for our purposes today, the Muslims occupied virtually more of Europe than this map, and more of Spain than this map indicates. There was just one small valley in the far north, right center, right there. Anyway, hence, the Arabs brought their own new foods, which were unknown to Europeans, and it expanded their diet in a very important way. I'm going to pause for a minute and take a look at the Spanish part.
Oops, sorry.
The Spanish part here of the new occupiers, the Muslims, they were Arabs and Berbers also that had been conquered and who joined the Islamic wave from the mountains of the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, right down in here. This was Berber territory. So now it was Arabs and Berbers who occupied Spain. And of course, they brought their own foods, the legumes. But just an interesting look at the Spanish language. They brought all kinds of other secondary types of foods, which were totally unknown to the population of Spain at the time, the Christians. The Arabs brought oranges, other citrus, sugar, rice, carrots, artichokes, and even though it's not a food, cotton. They brought all of these foods to Sicily, but now into Spain. And this is an interesting sidebar, that the Spanish language had no word. There was no word for any of these foods. Why? Because they didn't have these foods in Europe. So what happens to a language, say the Spanish at the time? They took the Arab word directly into their language. Now, this is fascinating. if you know Spanish, you will know what is the Spanish word for oranges. It's naranjas, which is an Arab word, totally Arab word, just taken into the Spanish language because they had no other word. And the citrus, like limon, for lemon, is an Arab word. What's the word for sugar in Spanish? Azúcar. Azúcar, sugar. It's a totally Arab word, which became part of the Spanish vocabulary. By the way, it came to the Spanish and then across to the Americas and to us in North America. All the Spanish speakers from Patagonia in the south to Brewster in the north. The language has thousands of Arab words. And what's the word for rice in Spanish? Arroz. Arroz. Totally borrowed from the Arabs. The word for carrots, zanahorias. An Arab word became the Spanish word. Alcahofas, the word for artichokes. Alcahofas, another Arab word. And the word for cotton, algodón. All these Arab words and hundreds of Arab words became permanently part of the Spanish language because they were unknown to the Europeans. Also, there's a lot of other vocabulary, just to mention. Foods are not the only objects that were new to Europeans. The Arab world at the time centered in, well, of course, in Damascus for 100 years, the Umayyad dynasty, then over in Baghdad. So Baghdad was now the, you can see on this map. Oh, the orange trees, the orange grove. Now this picture I took in southern Spain, right on the coast. Yeah, 2 pictures of the town of Motril on the south coast of Spain, south coast of Andalusia, and besides the wonderful whitewashed church, Spanish Catholic Church, all these trees are orange trees. So all of this, this whole fabulous paradise of orange trees, citrus trees, were brought by the Arabs, a gift of the Arabs. And this other picture shows sugarcane, principally sugarcane. This is also Motril, beautiful little whitewashed Andalusian town. So sugar, azúcar. By the word, there are a lot of Z's, the letter Z in the Arab words, like zanahorias, carrots, azúcar, sugar, arroz, rice. But look at just a glimpse at other Spanish words that they didn't have until the Arabs arrived. The word, well, like the Arabs back in Baghdad, Damascus and then Baghdad were highly civilized. This was the golden age. The most advanced sciences in the world were cultivated in the Muslim empire, in Islam, astronomy, medicine, all kinds of sciences. So a new word, zenith, was a new word brought in by the Arabs. Zenith, of course, means the highest point in the cosmos from where you're standing. The word algebra. Algebra is an Arab word. Europeans did not have algebra. By the way, there's a lot of AL words. Al, as in Al-Andalus and Andalusia. The al means the in Arabic. So you have algebra, means the science of algebra. Alhambra, the most beautiful palace in Southern Europe, in my taste, one of the most beautiful palaces of the Alhambra in Granada. Al-Andalus, even Alcatraz is an Arab word, the prison in San Francisco Bay, although it's an irony that Alcatraz is named for Alcatraces. He was a Spanish explorer who first sailed into San Francisco Bay in 1735. His name was Alcatraces, which is an Arab name. It's a Spanish, but of course, even a lot of the names are Arabic. But just as a personal note, when I go to the grocery store and pick up a bag of frozen peas, I look at the picture of the peas, and I sometimes, not every time, and I think to myself, these green peas came to Europe from the Arabs. It's a gift from the Arabs to Europe and then to us. And then I'll go over and pick up a bunch of carrots in the spray section. I'll look at the carrots and I'll say, zanahorias. These are zanahorias. They still, in Spanish, they still have the name, another gift from the Arabs. Another merit of learning some history is that life can be a little more rich if you know some history. You can make connections with the past. So what we've seen is that the diet of Europeans, what is next? The diet of Europeans has been changed profoundly by the invasion of the Muslims.
This one is math.
Okay. So in Europe, the principal diet for centuries had been, well, we'll summarize it with, what were the four main food groups? What were the four main food groups in Europe? Well, they were bread, and bread. And that was all changed after the Muslim occupation. Now an interesting study by a European author, Umberto Eco. He's an expert in semiotics and also a very inspired historian in Italy. He just died 5 years ago. But this is a paraphrasing Umberto Eco, very well informed. He says the legumes, the beans, peas, especially the broad beans, quote, was the most important development of the last 2,000 years. The legumes were the most important development of the last 2,000 years. It sounds like a remarkable claim, but if you look at the diet before, where the poor of Europe ate bread, was the principal diet, they could not afford meat or fish, so their diet was extremely limited. And as a result, let's look at what Umberto Eco is saying. Look at the future results. Because of their limited diet of bread, the Europeans were, on balance, unhealthy, sickly, emaciated. And with a new variety of diets, combination, the men having more nutritional food, the men became stronger. They could do more farm work. So they could live longer. The life expectancy expanded. even more interesting, the life expectancy of women increased from previously. Of course, a lot of women died in childbirth. From before, on the diet of bread, the average woman's life expectancy was 18 years. And after that, after the introduction of the legumes, the average life expectancy of women was 23 years. Now, how did that affect history? It meant that for women whose average life expectancy was 18, the period of time when she could give birth to an infant was, well, about one child. Now, change that and jump up a century later, the life expectancy of women was about 23 years. How many years was her body capable of giving birth? Well, more, 2 or 3, at least 2 or 3. So that meant that what was happening was women, because of the nutritional diet, became stronger, and fewer women died at childbirth. So that change in diet had a huge effect on the history of Europeans. So we've seen why the population of the Germans had increased during this period, and how that larger population militated toward the pioneer colonization movement of the German peoples toward the east. Now there were 3. Okay, now there were 3 other, I'm going to do those more rapidly. Other additional reasons for the colonization movement were some new inventions in the north of Europe. One is the next picture is the moldboard plow. Oops, the moldboard plow.
Here's the plow, then.
Okay, this is the moldboard plow right here, which will be invented. But let's go back to how was soil plowed originally with fertile crescent. This right here is a good drawing of the scratch plow, and you see it goes not too deep, but it goes 2, 3, 4 inches to plow the earth. This type of plow, variations of this, was the traditional plow for thousands of years, way over 4,000 or 5,000 years into Mesopotamia. This map shows the Fertile Crescent.
Oh,
Okay, now this is the Fertile Crescent. The type of plow that plowed soil where farming first began, which is in Mesopotamia, that is between the Tigris River here and the Euphrates River. The word for the land in between, two Greek words, Mesopotamia, between the rivers. So for thousands of years, that soil, as well as Syria here, this coast of and the entire Mediterranean shoreline, the type of dirt was thin. Topsoil was thin. There was it was light and dry dirt, and there was little rain. So therefore, one horse or an ox could pull a plow of the scratch plow, which we just saw. So all of this area for thousands of years was cultivated with the scratch plow, and that was adequate. Let's go back to the scratch plow. Here's the scratch plow again. What it really is, this is a slightly, basically, it's a glorified version of a sharp stick dragged through the soil. But this was adequate for plowing that vast area for thousands of years. Now, That's when the Germanic peoples, when they started farming the land, they could not use a scratch plow. A scratch plow was not strong enough to plow the soil up in Northern Europe. Why? Because the tangled vegetation, the roots went deep down into the soil, very different from the Mediterranean world. So the tangled vegetation, the bushes, underbrush, brambles, the roots of trees in that thick clay soil of Northern Europe, scratch plow is totally useless. Therefore, oh, by the way, why did the roots of bushes and trees and brambles go deep, so much deeper than the Mediterranean? Because it rained a lot more up in Northern Europe. It rained so much more than in the sunny Mediterranean that the dirt was moist down much deeper. And it's a terrible job to try to plow. Some of us have done that, plowed soil where you're cutting over deep roots. So here, now we're going to look at the new invention. This is a new invention, totally new type of plow. It's called the Moldboard Plow. It's got wheels on the front. Why wheels? So you can move this plow from one field to another. Very heavy. Now look at its features. You see this, what's a knife strapped on, not strapped on, it's spiked onto the main timber. It's a knife that cuts through the soil, and it takes draft animals to pull this. So this can cut much deeper than the scratch plow. And then that's only part of it, is the knife. Then if you look at the plow itself, it's wood that's curved. It's a curved wing-like board. And what it does, it curves and lifts the sod over, it flips it over upside down. Amazing invention. This is going to change history dramatically. Now, let's go. Okay, let's go. The first drawing or painting of this new plow was that was it. Is this from the Book of Psalms? Of course, the monks who illustrated their Gregorian chant and the scriptures from the Book of Psalms in the Old Testament. You see this, the first, and it's very good detail. Let's take a closer look at if you look at this plow, which first of all, you have two draft animals, and you see the cutting blade, it's just like in the drawing, and the same with the moldboard, is not as clear in this picture. By the way, and of course the plow existed many years before this actual painting, but take a look in the upper left. Here you have peasants who are smacking acorns from an oak tree to feed these pigs. Just a fascinating little detail. And look at this man in the field. After it's plowed, he is broadcasting the seeds, the grain seeds. And the word, by the way, NBC, the National Broadcasting Company, the word broadcasting comes from this medieval and earlier way of planting seeds. They were cast broadly, broadcasted. Okay, let's go to let's see what's next.
Well, you can go to the horse collar or you can go
No.
back. Okay,
Go on.
but yeah,
Okay, now this picture of
this is the field.
now we're looking at look at the field here. It's long, narrow fields that were plowed by the new moldboard plow. Why long and narrow? Let's can we take a look back at the scratch plow?
Yeah. Hold on.
Now look at this field. With a scratch plow, you just plow one direction the whole field, and then you plow the opposite direction the whole field. And with those two plowings, you've got it's well cultivated. Now go ahead with the new plow. This thing is incredibly heavy. It can take, and many of the new plows were much heavier, were larger, and it could take as many as 8 oxen to pull this thing. So when you get the end of a long field, it's a hell of a job to pick that up and turn it around, even with the wheels. It took several men to turn that around, and you have to be strong. So the solution was, instead of plowing a short field, you plow as far as you possibly can in one direction. The longer, the better. And then the men had the brutal job of turning that thing around. And then they wouldn't have to pick it up again until it got way back to the starting point.
Horse collars.
So this new plow that we're looking at made it possible for the German peoples in the northern part of the Europe to farm areas that had been impossible to farm before. If you cut down trees, clear a forest, we're going to pass over digging out the stumps, a horribly difficult job that some of us have done. And then plow the soil with this new type of plow. And that opened up vast new areas where the German people could grow immeasurably more crops. And of course, that made the pioneer movement possible. Okay, 2 more inventions we're going to do very briefly. Let's go to the horse collar. The horse collar, you just passed it up. Can you expand that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, many of us old enough to remember how horse collars were used all the time. Oh, there's a painting.
Yeah.
Is that near or far?
Mhm. Close.
Yeah. Now here's a picture of why was the horse collar so important? Because all in the Mediterranean climate, you could just put a leather strap around the neck, the throat, the neck of a horse, but a heavier plow, a horse couldn't pull a heavier plow because that strap was pressing on the jugular vein and pressing on the windpipe, and that would strangle a horse.
Oh, good.
So the horse, look at this, that's one of the early paintings, drawings of a horse collar. The horse with the horse collar that spreads out the weight. So that was a hugely important invention. And we were still using that, still used up the Twist River. And only Scott used to use draft horses. And there's work horses up the Twist River that's still using. Our barn, we had old abandoned horse collars in our barn. So they're still used up almost to a present day. Okay, and then a final invention, the nailed horseshoe. The horseshoe was important because a horse, any draft animal working on rocky terrain, their hooves wore out very rapidly. So this is a metal horseshoe with the nails. Quick glance at the nails, and then we'll come back. These are horseshoe nails. Everybody used to be familiar with these. They come in 25-pound wooden boxes. Gets back to the horseshoe. Where a horse is wearing a metal horseshoe, the horse could work in all weathers. It also could work in all terrains, including rocky terrains. So that was also an underrated invention back at the time of the pioneering movement. Okay, we ran a little longer than I expect, but
Go back to you.
yeah. So what we've seen so far today is the great emperor, king and emperor Otto I, who reassembled much of Charlemagne's Eastern German Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, conquered peoples to the east, and made it possible to expand this extraordinary colonization movement, pioneer movement toward the east of the German peoples. And that was possible because of an extraordinary population increase of the Germans, because of more nutritional food, the legumes, beans, peas, broad beans. And then 3 other inventions: the moldboard plow, for the first time, made it possible to plow the deep roots of brambles and vegetation and trees. And then finally, the invention of the horse collar and nailed horseshoes. It went a little longer than usual, but do any of you have any observations or questions?
Here's a question from Sarah Walker. Why was Otto's reign called the Holy? Why wasn't it called the Holy German Empire?
Oh, okay, interesting question. Why was Otto's empire not called the Holy German Empire? In fact, it was an empire of the Germanic peoples. Otto, like Charlemagne, well, Otto was determined to use as much of the ancient Roman Empire as they could, because of its extraordinary prestige, and it was so valuable as a way of achieving higher civilization, to use the Roman model. And in fact, the term that they did use, the Holy Roman Empire, holy in as much as it's now a Christian empire, Catholic empire, also Otto is linking his empire with ancient Rome, which adds a lot of prestige, adds the nuance of a higher civilization. That's why they're calling it a Holy Roman Empire, even though the people were Germans. It was a Germanic empire. Yeah, thank you for the question, Sarah. Okay, any other, Julianne?
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or observations?
Unmute. Okay. It's Val. I'm
Yeah,
wondering,
Val Sukhavati, go ahead, Val.
do we know where the Slavic people came from, or were they considered indigenous? And does the name Slavic just come from the fact that they were slaves, or does it have a different origin?
A good, excellent question. The Slavic peoples were first noticed in history down in the lower Dnieper in present-day Ukraine, and a little farther north. But they, of course, had not unified into any political state. But now, where did they come from before that? I'm trying to think. I'm not sure if they came from Oh, no, they were an Indo-European language group. So they originated in fact, in the Ukraine area between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. They were there for many hundreds of years. So that's where they were originated, yeah. As early as 2000 BC, that's 4,000 years ago. And then they did expand up into the north with and of course, their Slavic language spread out into Polish, Russian, Bulgarian, so on. Let's see, there's another part of your question.
The Slav as
Oh, yeah,
slave.
Now, where did the word Slavic come from? It was attached later because the Slavic peoples were so easy to capture and sell as slaves. They were sold down the Dnieper River. Oh, do we have can we do that map of the Baltic? Anyway, they were the time of the Venetian Empire, Seaboard Empire, the fleets, galleys from Venice and Genoa, both sailed up into the Black Sea, which of course is tragically in the news every hour right now, into the Black Sea and up into the Crimean Sea. And that's where traders would come down the Dnieper River, also the Don River, with slaves. And there were so many slaves that came from that area, people started calling them the Slavic peoples, the Slavic peoples. Yes, yeah, it's that reveals a bitter part of their early history of the Slavic peoples. Good question. Thank you, Val.
Thank you.
Any other?
I'm going to end the.
Yeah.